I've been set up. Thank you. Uh, Before we get into this, I think everyone knows who I am and I've been around a long time, but let's talk about a little bit of the other side of my background. That's my art training, which ended in the 5th or the 6th grade when I happily trotted down to the woodworking shop with all my buddies and no longer suffered the embarrassment of trying to paint something, and all the girls did a great job and all us guys were in trouble. So that's where I'm coming from. This is not, a professor of art up here, and this may not be that, quote, artistic. And I'm not going to try to be, because I'm not an artist. I don't have a studio. If you come to my place, it's a woodworking shop, and that's that. So that's where we're coming from, and what I want to do tonight is to keep this quite tight and narrow. When you talk about design or you read the books, it can be terribly wild and ranging, and you get out there and your head hurts. You don't know what they're talking about. At least I do. So this is going to be kept tight. I want to keep it very simple, and I hope it becomes memorable for us as wood turners. Memorable in the sense that we remember some of these concepts, we can go apply them, and they'll help us in the future. As I was preparing this and going through it, I was trying to think, well, how how am I going to show the differences and all of the things going on? And it kept popping in my mind the story about this fellow had a pet chicken. He had this pet chicken, and he just loved this chicken and took it with him everywhere he went. So one day he decided, hey, I'm going to go see a movie. So he goes down to a movie theater, and he's heading up to the ticket counter to buy a ticket. He says, you can't take a chicken in here. What are you thinking about? I'm not going to sell you a ticket. So this guy's depressed. He's back. And just about to get in his pickup truck, he says, hey, I got an idea. So he takes the chicken and he stuffs him in his pants, puts a little jacket on, goes back up there, gets a ticket, goes right in, looks around, he sits kind of to the side. But wouldn't you know it, just before the show starts, these two old gals come and sit next to him. Emily and Ruth. We all know Emily Ruth. We've seen them everywhere at the restaurant, so forth. So anyway, the movie starts. About 10, 15 minutes into this movie, this doggone chicken gets restless. And you can imagine how that would be. So the guy's, oh, geez, what am I going to do? So he zips down his fly, lets the chicken's head out. Soon thereafter, Emily says, Ruth, the man next to me is exposing himself. Ruth says, Emily, forget about it. Just ignore it. You know you've seen one, you've seen them all. She says, I know, but this one's eating my popcorn. Okay. Part of what I want to do is have fun. So I hope I've got everyone in a decent mood and hopefully haven't offended everyone. So let's talk about, firstly, what we want to do tonight is explore the classic curves in open form footed bowl design. And let's go find some bowls here. And what we're talking about is an open form. This would be an open form bowl. An open form is defined as the top, or the lid, is the largest diameter of the bowl, and it has a foot. It's not flat. This would be a closed form, and there's no foot on it. So it's flat, and it's closed. We see the largest diameter is right around here. This would be an elliptical shape. Just a little basic definitions of what we're going to talk about and what we're not going to talk about. And I'm doing flip charts. My wife said, why don't you do it in PowerPoint? And I said, if I do it in PowerPoint, someone's going to think I'm an expert. And we don't want that to happen. So, what I want to share with you, again, not being a person with art training and so forth, is kind of the trip I went, or the exploration that I went through. And the first thing is I asked myself the question, why are some of my bowls attractive, few, and others are just off, or they're downright unpleasant? And I think we've all experienced that when you're on the lathe and you make this nice shape, and oh, that's great, and you flip it over and you turn the inside and you put it on the shelf and you say, what happened? And I see people smiling. You've done that. So I said to myself, well, how come that happens? Is there a way to prevent it or reduce it? So the next thing I said is, are there some basic design approaches that always produce an attractive bowl, or at least avoid making an unpleasant one? I'd be happy with the latter, but it would be nice if you had some criteria here that if you followed, you'd come up with a good-looking bowl. So that led me to the first thing I tried the last 2 years is get someone to come in here and do this presentation. They all ran away from it real fast, so it became, well, I guess I better do it myself. So I got the books. Good old Richard, Ray Key, and Hayes. I started reading the books, trying to understand them, and so forth. And what I found is that they went through all of these basic things, and then quickly they were off into other areas. And they showed a lot of pictures, but they never zeroed in. It was not as tight as they wanted, and didn't answer my questions. So, from the literature, what it says is that the golden mean proportion and the sphere, catenary, and the ellipse curves are aesthetically pleasant. We've all read that, seen that. So, if that's true, then we could say, therefore, this is my methodical thinking, therefore, in theory, using them as a basic design approach should produce attractive, pleasant bowls. It seems to make sense. And in the books, I couldn't find it. They go through all of this, you'd flip the page, and I want to see a picture of one of these blooming things. And it's something else, so it's frustrated. So we're going to have to do it ourselves. So, whoops. We don't need that one anymore. So, what we find then is, but the literature does not show pictures. It doesn't make comparisons of the various curves, nor draw any conclusion. So there's a void here that we'd like to try to fill. So let's test the theory. We'll do the comparisons and draw some conclusions about this. And what I hope is you'll participate in this as you look at the bowls. You'll see things that I haven't seen. Bring them up. Let's write them down. And obviously questions at any time. So that leads to this demonstration. And what is it we want to cover tonight? We want to look at proportion, and we're going to cover the golden mean real quickly. We're going to look at the curves and find out how to make templates to ensure that we've actually turned to that curve and have it correct. We're going to discuss designing the foot. Then we're going to test the theory. And we're going to look at 21 bowls that are in sequence, and they're 7 each, coming from 5 diameter in 1 inch increments up to 11 inches. And I'll put them on the stadium shelves there with the sphere, catenary, and ellipse, and we'll look at them and see what we can come up with out of that. Then we'll do some comparisons looking at the aspect ratios of each of these bowls, and that'll help us compare one to the other. Then we'll get into, okay, these are a lot of, and they're all 1 inch high. 2 inches, what did I say? Who knows what I said? Then we're going to look at applying it to logs. What happens when we go out in the yard, get that stuff, whack it up, bring it in, and turn it? Will it still apply? And then we'll try to make some conclusions. So let's start with proportion and consider the golden mean. Now, the golden mean is a ratio. Proportion is a ratio, obviously. 1 is to, or A is to B, and so forth. The formula for that is 1 plus the square root of 5 over 2, and the answer is 1.62. I didn't calculate it. I just copied it from the book, and the number goes on infinitely. Any questions at the break? See Neil. But so let's try to think of what it is and how we can simplify it and then keep it in our head to use in turning. What we're talking about is how do you divide a line in a proportion such that the large line AB is to A as A is to B. Okay? And the answer is, from the formula, if you take AB, that length, and you divide it by 165, you get A. Divide that by 165, you get B. So they are proportionate to that ratio, 1.65 to 1. Okay? So let's do the algebra arithmetic and figure out some simple way that we can remember it. The easiest thing is the length is 100%. A is 62%, and B is 38%. So if we want to divide something by the golden mean, you just divided it to 62% and 38%. And the golden mean was first in the literature in about 350, I believe it is, BC, and it was there in Euclid's Elements, I believe it is, and he explained it, showed all the math, and if you look it up on Wikipedia, don't make the mistake I did. I hit print. 24 pages later, I had 15 pages of formulas. And I looked at it every which way from Sunday, and I was only interested in the history and this much, which I took out of it. But the interesting thing is the golden mean, you can find it'll be called the golden proportion. Then it even became the, I need to get that thing right in my eyes. It even became the divine portion. And there's a group that went out that thought that this was God's way of enlightening us into how the way the universe worked. And would I mess you up, Mike? I'm sorry. Okay. So anyway, this group went out and they tried to prove that the golden mean was found throughout nature. And you'll see pictures where they show the human body divided into the golden mean from the eyes to here and this to there and so forth. And then they went out and they studied all these animal skeletons and they came up with data to show that this was divine. Well, it turns out they studied it later. They fudged the numbers, pushed them in, and there was no proof there. But anyway, it's quite interesting if you look at it. The next thing we'll look at is the next part of proportion is the golden rectangle. And then again, we have another aspect ratio here. And the way you can come up with this without doing any arithmetic or high math is simply draw a square. And in this case, I made an 8 by 8 square. Then you find the middle of the base of the square, put your compass point here, your marker there, and draw this arc. Where the arc comes down to your baseline is the new length, and then you can just draw it out, and now we have the golden rectangle. And if we look at the aspect ratio of it, take 13 divided by 5, and bingo, there you are back again to the magic number that keeps repeating. Okay. Now, did I get through that fast enough for everyone? Okay. Well, let's talk about some practical applications of proportion. Given that there's a theoretical base that goes way back and is in the literature, has been used by artists, architects, so forth, and they say the golden rectangle is the same shape as the Pantheon, and all the Greeks used it, so forth. However, what we find later on with more reading, studies of the ratios from 1 to 2.5. 1 we know is a square, 2.5 is a longer rectangle. When they looked at that and they had all of them out there and said, after group after group after group, pick the one that's the most appealing. Well, it turned out there was not one most appealing, which we thought would be the golden mean. Instead, it's 1.5, 162, and 177. And also, they were about the same. It wasn't that the golden mean got 80% and there was 10 and 10. It wasn't a nice smooth thing. It was just about a third, a third, a third. So from that, what we find is that artists and other people have made the rule of thirds popular. And how would we apply that? Simply would say the foot or the base of a bowl ought to be 1/3 the diameter. The height ought to be 2/3 if you wanted to build it up into the golden rectangle, get close to it, rather than calculating these things. Just it's easy for me. It's easy to divide something by 1/3. And then, as I look at it, staying with the thirds, a third diameter for the height, it also looks pretty good. And we'll look at some of those later on this evening. So what we want to understand here is that, yes, there's a concept of proportion. It's been in the literature for a bazillion years. It's been tested, and yeah, it is pleasing, pleasant-looking stuff. Now let's get into each of these classic curves. And the first one is a sphere. I don't have to explain that. It's round. But what we want to do is talk about how we can make a template and then turn to that template and end up with a truly spherical bowl or turning. And the first thing I want to talk about is making the template. And here is a template I've set up that would be a 10-inch diameter bowl, 4 inches high, with a 4-inch foot. Go with a third. And you notice the first thing is I have the bottom line, or the total shape. Then I have another line above it. Now that's to allow for the bottom of the curve not to penetrate and pierce the plane on which our bowl is going to sit. So we want to have a little Lebensraum in there. So what we're going to do is, and I usually do this on graph paper because it just makes it a lot easier. So we've got a couple lines here to get us lined up. We're going to try to tape this guy on. Hopefully it'll stay there. to the size of this, I had to make a little extension. So we'll put that on here. Quickly. Another high-tech implement here. And then what we need to do is find the point where this curve or this segment of a sphere is going to hit both of the top rim of the bowl, right? Come down here and just hit the bottom. And so we end up coming up here, moving it up and down, and it's kind of an iterative process until you find it. The other way of finding it, which Neil told me, draw a line through here, find the middle of it, go up, and you'll be right there. But anyway, I just do an iterative process, except for tonight, where you're going to be amazed at just how fast I find this rascal. Okay, let's see. There it is. Okay. This is going to be close enough for demo. And I got a problem here. It's not going to work. Okay, there we go. Puff it out. Got it. So we just draw it, bingo. Boom. Huh? Now that is artistic, huh? Okay. So, now remember I want to stop here and point something out. Remember here, I put two lines in that are going to be where we want our foot to be. And the 1/3, I choose to put it up here at the intersection of where it intersects with the sphere or whatever it is. And I just do. Then what's happened here is the height of that foot is now forced. Right? It's got to be that height. If you make it a smaller and still don't come through the base, well, you're going to be back here and you're no longer going to be 1/3. If you go out here, look how high it's going to have to be to keep visually to see that bowl come through. Everyone see how it?
Yeah, John, I've been told that you want to keep that contour at the bottom, visually above your tabletop or your horizontal plane.
Right.
You don't want it going down inside your plane.
Yes.
So that's what you're doing.
That's what I'm trying to do. And I'll show it later again when I go through the step of designing the foot. But I want to show you here how that when you draw it, it forces it. And when you look at it, you say, oh my goodness, what a high foot. Well, boy, I made a lot of little ones, and that's maybe some of my problems in the past. Okay, so how do we then go about turning a sphere from the template? So we just take this baby, fold it in half, keeping that line on the center, and get some scissors, and we're going to cut it out kind of as close as we can. And now this is not precision engineering. This is getting close. So that's the shape we want. Now let's cut our foot out, just like so. And fold it back. And now, as we're turning the bowl, we simply put this on here. There's our base. There's where it's coming down. This is where our foot needs to be. And we go ahead and turn to the template. Okay? It's that simple. Now, one thing we want to think about if you're going to turn to a template is make your template smaller than your blank, because you got to clean up your blank. I mean, don't make it the exact size, because you're going to end up taking, when they're floppy doodle and wobbly on there, you're going to end up pushing them all over the place. Okay, so that's our sphere. Do you want me to pass this one? Okay. No, that's something I thought you could see from the back there. I picked something that would be big enough so that I hope everyone can see it. And as we're going to get into the yes. No, I just picked it. I just picked it. No, it's. Was it 12? Whatever. It's 12 by 4. Good. Because these are 10-inch. That's what I was looking at. Okay, and what I've been doing for the actually all of them, but I wanted to do the sphere up there where we could maybe see it better, is that I went down to Hobby Lobby and bought one of these little easels. They're about 15 bucks or something, and then a cork board, and just stick it on there, have it in the shop. But maybe after this I'll have we'll vote it to be a studio. And I put some graph paper on, just happens to be 1/4 inch, and I marked it out 1, 2, 1, and down, just to be able to have a quicker reference. Now here I just made the same template. This is 10 by 5, I got it. And a catenary curve is the form or the curve that occurs when you hang a flexible chain between 2 points. And it's been used in architecture, art for many, many, many years. And you could look at, say, the Golden Gate Bridge. That would give you an idea of what a catenary would be. It actually isn't, because it's being pulled down to suspend it. But catenaries are used in a lot of arches or catenaries. You'll see them in the Roman arches are really not square, rounded tops. They look closer to a catenary. And the catenary is used as an arch. When you think about it, rather than this thing coming out and being a sphere, it comes down and then flattens out. That's the gravity pulling down on this chain. So if you flip it over and you're using it as an arch, the reverse is occurring, and it's pushing, centralizing, conceptually, the weight back down to the 2 posts that are holding it up. If you have a real flat one, it's going to want to push it out and so forth. So that's the kind of the idea of why they were using it. So how are we going to draw this thing? Well, simply, we have a chain, necklace kind of a chain, and I'm going to put it what's going to be one rim, and then I'll come over here, and I'll tell you this is the hardest part, because I got pretty close. My fingers are getting in the way here. Oh, 2 more. Okay. That is close enough. Now, again, we are not trying to make a perfect catenary. If you wanted to do that, there are plenty of programs out there that'll draw it and print it out and it'll be dead on. What we want to get is visually close enough. So what I do is I just take a pencil and put a bunch of dashes through there. Boom, boom, boom. All the way up. Do it more carefully. Then again, just bend it, cut it out, and I'm good to go. Put my feet in, and I've got another template ready to turn to. The other interesting thing is that you want to put a level on here, and I hit it just right. So make sure that this is concentric. However, if you want to play around with other designs, you can do something like this and say, gee, I like that shape, and there's going to be the bottom of my bowl. Or I like this guy, it's real dramatic. And you can just play around with it that way, and you'll end up with a nice, smooth curve that is may or may not be appealing, but you can do it. Okay, so, and I'm not going to mess around cutting that out. Now let's do the ellipse. And we set it up pretty much the same way. Whoops, I'm going to take that one. And again, we make the blank the same way. The two lines, find the center, put some points in where we're going to have our foot, and leave something on the bottom so that when we cut it out, it's there. Now the ellipse, there's they describe different methods of drawing it, and what I found the simple one is kind of an adoption from the string and pencil method. And here what you do is take a compass that I forgot to bring. We're going to use the monster here. But what you do is you find you take half of the base, set your compass there, and then swing an arc up. And you get two marks, one here and one here. These are going to be the focal points or the foci of an ellipse. Then you do the same thing, get your, and come back here and bring our chain up there. And then what I do is just, I'm not sure. Oh, okay. How's that? Is that showing up? Okay. Just put your pencil in here. Oops, I get that a little. And we just come around and it swings right up. Whoops, I got my points off. What did I do here? But as you come around, and just use the chain to do it rather than the string method, and you get close enough. It's a wrinkling line, but again, we're not trying to be perfect here. No, I'm making a template, and I just use poster board. The question is, am I doing it on the wood? The answer is no. I'm doing it, making a template out of poster board, and then I start turning First establish, it's cleaned up, establish the base, establish the foot, and then keep pushing it in there and work your way around to end up with a bowl that has a shape. Does that answer it? Okay. Oh, I know what the chain is supposed to be on the focal points, and I put it outside, but anyway, it's in the books. Okay. I think that's covered that. So now, what's the next item here? Oh, designing the foot. Oop. I feel like a confused magician here pulling all this stuff out. Okay. So here's a sphere without a foot. Okay. So we have that. Now we're going to put a foot on there. So if we put a foot on there that is one third the diameter and at the proper height, and we get it on there. That looks pretty reasonable. We did it. Now, as Glenn said, pointed out, well, what happens if you make it too small? Then this is going to end up breaking the plane that it's sitting on, and you want it to be above that so that visually you're able to see that entire arc. Yeah, we sure would have gone through. So that's a no-no. In order to keep this flat on the table, we would have had to cut the heck out of that thing, which we didn't want to do. So we can fix that. Let's make it higher. Except that's pretty big. That's a big foot on there. Now you'd want to go ahead and make a big foot on that. If it's a worker bowl, it's a salad bowl, or something like that that people are going to be coming in and out of, you increase the size of that foot. Well, what if we make it smaller? Okay, you could do that. I don't like it. It's kind of funky, and it's going to be tippy. But you'll see a lot of small feet, and people feel artistically that they like them. So if you like them, fine. But the middle one is the proportionate one. In any event, don't make it too small. So that you want to make sure that visually it's not crashing through nor sticking way up in the air. Okay. Any comments or discussions about the foot? Just again, keep it proportionate, make it high enough so that you're not hitting that plane. Okay. Now, foot is a third the height of.
So that you're taking 2/3 of your overall height is the bowl, and the lower third is the foot. Pedestal.
No, I'm not. The question is, would we look at taking, having like the foot be a pedestal and then the bowl on that and the proportions there? My answer is no, not tonight, because we're going to keep this very classic and tight. But that's where you can go with this. and I bet you I know someone who'll do a demonstration on it. Okay. Well, let's. Can you hold this mic? Okay. Now we said that one of the. I said one of the problems with the literature is that you can't flip the page and see one of these bowls. What do they look like? And what about sequence and so forth? So we go to the shop and let's turn some of them using templates. And these are going to be the spheres. And we're going to increase these, hold the height constant at about 2 inches. So about 2. Depends what the wood gave me. And we'll take a look at what happens as you hold that height constant and increase the diameter. And these are all spherical, yes. Yep. Spherical, they're all 2 inches with roughly 2. Some of them are 1 7/8, one a little larger. They all have the foot is 1/3. And I kept the foot I always kept the foot in that little design because I didn't want to put any cutesy-poo things on there and distract from just looking at the shape. So there they are. No, and the little ones it was outside, and the big ones it happened to be inside when I turned it. Yeah, the tenon when I held it. Yep. Right. And yeah. And if you look in here on all of these, I've come back and cut around inside. Now, it is not correct. If you put a scale on there, you'll find one that's dead on. I know there's one in there somewhere. But just look at the illusion of it. If you have it here, boom, and you flip it over and you say, oh, of course it's a continuous curve. Well, you can't tell because the foot's in the way. But it's a way to have that sense. So all of those have that in them. So what do we think?
How thick do you like to make the bowl?
Pardon?
How thick do you like to make them?
How thick?
The bowl, the body.
I don't have anything that I do. It depends on how big it is. And what you're going to. If it's a worker bowl, you want to keep it thick. If it's display bowl, sometimes you want to make it nice and thin. It just depends on the use. So the question here is, they're all turned to the classic quote spherical form. They've got a proportionate foot, and they're all hopefully the right height. They float a little bit. Do you see a bummer in there? I mean, it looks goofy? I did. Okay. Okay. Okay, from here up for you are pleasing, and from here down, the foot kind of knocks them off, and this one looks goofy to you. Okay. Okay, good, good. And the angle? It's a sphere. A sphere is a sphere. It's just a little one. Yeah, okay. Good. That should be proportionate because I think they should be because they were drawn that way and they fall in. I did for these. I did for these. And we'll talk about that later. This was learning process for me. And then I got into, well, what happens over that span of holding it constant and changing the diameters, and you're seeing some things that's good. Let's do the same thing. And now what we want to look at is the catenary. And we have, again, we're going to have these 5-inch, or roughly the I am not going to solicit from you suggestions for further turning and study. Yes, I'm turned out. How's that? Are they roughly on above each other? And some of these, this guy's a little bit high, but so now what do you see? Just first look at the catenary in and of itself, and then Catenary sphere. Let me get out of everyone's way here.
Until you get down to the end, there's very little difference visually.
Ah, okay. So what we're seeing is, so you're seeing not too much difference here, but then as they get, okay, good. Any 3 on the left are a little ho-hummy. Okay. Okay. Remember, the sphere is the sphere, and the catenary remember our catenary is supposed to be here exaggerated. It's a U. Bring it out, and it looks more roundy or spherical. You see? So you should be seeing somewhere in there, but you guys are getting ahead of me. Keep going. So you're seeing some interesting things here in and of each of them, as well as between. And that's a comparisons we're going to want to make here in our next step. Okay, let's do the same thing. Okay. Now we're going to do it with the ellipse. Very close, yes. It originally was described by one of the masters way back. Who was it? Kant or somebody described it as parabolic, and then later, about 100 years later, someone did the math, and it wasn't. Exactly. It's not exactly. Okay, here's our ellipse. Ooh. So again, I'd ask you first to look at the ellipse in and of itself and see what you see, what you like, you don't like. Are they all decent? Or they're all decent, aren't they? Huh? Yeah, right. Okay. Okay. Yes, sir. Okay. Okay. Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Good. Good. So, yes, John.
Just an observation, it seems that the line connecting the foci of your ellipse is horizontal, is that correct?
These are all on axis. That's correct. And that's, I've got two more bowls. I'll be doggone. Here, one thing you can do with the ellipse is interesting, is all of the ones are on axis. This is an on axis. And now what happens if you go the same size bowl and everything, but this is 3/8 off axis. That is, the axis is 3/8 of an inch up here. Only 3/8 of an inch, little or nothing. But look at the, all of a sudden it becomes more towards spherical and catenary, doesn't it? It's just 3/8 of an inch, took the closure off it. Changed it, right? So yes, these are on axis, but you can play around coming off axis and do stuff like this and still be having the form of the ellipse, just different parts of it. And of course, the first bowl I showed you to compare a closed form to the open form, that was an ellipse. Just kept going around. Okay? Well, what we want, our step here then is to do these comparisons. We want to look at them, see if there are any bowls that are just plain off or downright don't make it. And I think they're all in the ballpark. People like some, dislike others. I'm not enamored of the ellipse. As John said, he didn't. I'm not particularly enamored. Well, let's look at that aspect ratio that we talked about before. And the aspect ratio here is the diameter of the bowl divided by its height. And I was able to quickly calculate them because I used 2 inches on every one of them. And these are all 11 inches, pretty doggone close. But we just want to see what we have here. Here's a low. Here would be our low aspect ratio to the high aspect ratio. And we started comparing them. You started seeing different things go on. So here are some of the comparisons that I saw and found. And the first one is, let's look at the first 2 rows. Again, the bottom row is the sphere, and the top is the catenary. And someone, sorry, I don't remember who pointed it out, said they look the same. Well, by golly, when the aspect ratio approaches 6, or is higher than that, a sphere and a catenary are the same. You can't tell the difference. If you draw 2 of them, the bloody lines fall upon each other, and someone already observed that. Someone said, you know, they're the same. Right. So that's the first comparison we could make between those 2. Let's look at, see if anything else becomes the same. Let's go the other way with the aspect ratio moving to lower ratios, and when you get down to 2, look what happens. The sphere and the ellipse become essentially the same. And let's think about how we drew the ellipse. When you take your compass and you bring it up, you end up in the middle of it if you have a square. And so when you swing it down and go around, it's the same as having a compass. So there we are. And let's see if we could see it. There they are. You can't really, you know, visually you can't tell the difference. So if we go up here, and we said, let's bring these guys out, and there we go. Get everyone. It's really hard to see a difference. There probably isn't any, in practicality. There may have been in the templates, but after I turned them, they're the same. Get close. They're close. You know how that goes. Okay. Okay, so we've seen them. We can see these different things happening that I had not realized were going to happen. Let's talk a little bit about volumes and see what happens here. If we think about the ellipse, because it's going out before it comes in, it's always going to have the largest volume, of course, greater than 2, because at 2, they're tied. So if you think about, if you have any concern, you're making a salad bowl or something, you want a bigger, you'd think about, well, maybe a catenary. The ellipse will generate the larger one. The catenary is always going to be the smallest because that's coming in. And as John pointed out, hold your ears, CJ, said, this is very important if one's going to make a pair of popcorn bowls. Oh, geez, back to popcorn. I didn't mean to do that. And John said, you go to the wife and say, I'm going to make you a popcorn bowl. And that lovely necklace you have just reminds me of the catenary. So I'm going to make you a catenary. Well, what are you going to make for yourself? Oh, I'll just make an old sphere, something like that. And over about 50 years, that's a lot of popcorn when you think about it. So there may be some things to consider. Now, one thing is everyone noticed in the middle, and this will be part of our conclusions here, that the greatest differentiation between the three is occurring about midpoint, about the 4.5 aspect ratio. So when you're thinking about designing, if you're out here in these forms and you want to make two different, you only have one choice. You got to go to an ellipse or here. If you're down at the other end, again, you have no choice. You've got to go a catenary and a sphere. So when you're thinking about the design aspect ratios, it plays in here. So now, okay, let's clear the decks here, if I may, and this is just like my shop. There's never enough room for everything. And we're taking a little more time than I had planned, but we're having some good questions, I think. Let's wrap it up fast here. Okay, so we said in our outline that then we'd go take a look at what happens when we apply these principles to logs. So now let's go out in the yard, get some wood, and see what happens. And you can tell I'm really getting tired here of turning. Okay, so how about a natural edged bowl? There's our sphere, our catenary, and the ellipse. Oop, they were green. And they are, so you can see how the sphere is nicely rounded. This one's cutting in a little more, the catenary, and then our ellipse is coming out and around, coming out and around. So I think all of them in this case are appealing. Just depends which one you particularly care for. So it works there. Now, let's start with a, let me think where I need to be here. The 4. Okay, let's look at spheres now, and we're going to start increasing the diameter as well as the height. So, again, I don't know. I'll say yes. To a mathematician, you crazy. D. And I forgot to bring a tape measure. I have them at home, but I'm sorry, I don't remember. But the point here is, we looked at these spheres coming across holding that height constant. Now let's look at the sphere, and again, all of the feet are proportionate, about 1/3 the diameter, and the appropriate height. Do we see any? How does it look now if you apply the same thing out here to the old back logs? They're all decent. All fine. So, okay. Let's do the same thing with the catenary. And you stay there. Yeah. And it would have been nice if I could have grown these, in height and diameter, but, the wood pile is a wood pile. So there's our catenary, and I think we'd say they're all decent looking. Would you agree to that? Now, interesting that I made a comment earlier that using a height of 1/3 the diameter versus the 2/3, to me, is pretty good looking. This is 15-inch diameter, 5 high, with a 5-inch diameter foot. And I think it's an appealing bowl, both in its shape and proportions. Okay.
How do you determine the height of the foot? Is that back on that?
It was forced when you draw it, and whatever the width is from there up to the curve, you're stuck with that. If you want to have the bottom of it come in nicely, not lose the flow of it. Well, let's see. I don't know who made this bowl, but let's compare that catenary with this one. Let's see if you see a problem. Talking about feet and mouth. The foot's too low, right? Can you see it? If you follow the curve down, thank you. If you follow the curve down, the bottom of it is down in here someplace versus following that curve. It's a nice bowl, no question, but it's off. It's off just a tad. It's Catenary. Well, this is a low shelfer, and that's a high shelfer. How's that? How's that? That's a way out of the problem. But for my wife, it's under the in the cabinet. Okay, then at the end here, let's running a tad over time. So can we make some conclusions? We came up with the general theory that said if you follow proportion and if you use the classic curves, all of which are pleasing, you should produce a pleasing bowl, or at least not an unpleasant one. So can we say, when we look at these bowls, can we say that we've kind of that theory holds true? Yeah? Okay. So we can check that off on our to-do list. Did we fill the voids, the void filled that we saw in the literature? We couldn't see the results. Well, I don't have any pictures, but there are the bowls to look at. So you were able to see them, visualize the results of what happens if you use these things. We have comparisons. We just completed them, and we saw that the different aspect ratios, the different curves are the same. When you see in the middle aspect ratio, you see the most difference. And these are things that we can think about, in the future when we're approaching a bowl and want to design it, think it through. And I think this becomes a foundation for design. And it's something I wish I had known when I started turning. I think I would not have had as many bummers there on the shelf upstairs that I'm still hoping one of my daughters will come by and say, "Oh, I love that, Daddy." I think they're smart enough not to. And so in conclusion, I think in conclusion of the presentation, I hope I've covered everything that we said we would. I hope we have come up with a foundation here for future design work that you might do. Something I found by going through this exercise is now that when I turn, I stay roughly within those parameters. I don't get out in as much trouble as I used to. And no, I don't turn every bowl to a template, but it might be good to do that. Are there any comments or questions?
I used to think I knew how to make a bowl because of that.
Oh, sorry, Dale. I guess it's working. Yes.
Hey, John, the back on your template, you cut out inside.
Mm-hmm.
I would assume you could also use that for the inside of the bowl.
Yes. You just say, if you're going to have a 3/8 wall thickness, just whack that off. And other than the ellipse, it won't fit in there, but the others, I just stick them in and eyeball it. But I'm usually measuring wall thickness all the way down, and then hope I don't blow out the bottom or leave it too fat. But that's a good point.
John, I like to see this as SWOT. This is the quality of construction. Very nice.
Oh, thank you.
Like to do it 4 times a day.
No. I think it bear. Yes, sir. Yeah, Tom?
Part of the CRS, the diameter of the foot is in relationship to the height or the diameter of the bowl?
The diameter of the bowl. The height, the diameter of the foot is in relationship to the height of the bowl or the diameter of the bowl. It's to the diameter. No, nothing dumb. But
Use a blank like this.
Yes.
You already got it round.
Mhm.
Still gonna have to true it up.
Mhm.
I'm assuming you truing all this, and then you're taking your template and letting this width decide where that foot is.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Let's.
You gotta have the template smaller than this blank.
Right. So let's say if theoretically I had a blank there, 12 by 4 inches. Let's hope it was 4 1/4 by 12 3/8 probably, at least, so that when I trued it up, I could hit my 12 and my 4. And the foot, again, is internal to it. You know, there's your foot. Right? So you'd have chucked it up, and say in this case it's on a screw chuck, and you'd come in, start working the back, face it off, catch this, come up here to get through depth, and then work it around, and keep just sticking the template in to make sure you're there. Now, when I first started doing this, I was going to, boy, these things are going to be good. And I went crazy on one of them. I had this ridge, and I'd take it out and put it back, go this way and that way and everything. And finally, I said, you know, you better go rest. You've lost it. And I picked up the template, and I said, you know, you're not a good guy with scissors. And so, again, I want to make the point is that you can't see that this bowl is not perfect. So the template gets you in the ballpark. I can guarantee if you go up here too high and say, oh, rats, I'll just blend it, it'll stick out like a sore thumb. But if you're within a 30 seconds around there, you're just fine. Not only that, as we know, especially on these guys, this would have been a perfect sphere when I turned it. Now, the outside of it. When I turned the inside of it, I remember hitting the chisel, and it was going, well, it's no longer spherical because it's already moved on you. So please do not take anything I'm saying as, dead on. You want to have a nice curve, no lumps in it, and proper proportion and so forth, but not, don't go crazy here. Plus, you'll sand that much away if you've got a bad spot here and there. So that's my goal here, is just get us in the ballpark. And as we can see, these are in the ballpark and they're pleasing. Okay. Anything else?
John, I just want to mention that you've shown 3 classic bowl designs, and they all look really, really good. There are a lot of other designs that can be used to make the bowls look good as well.
Oh.
The OG curve going the other way
Oh.
will give you a very attractive bowl as well. This is 3 designs, of which are John's done a wonderful job
Yeah.
putting together, but there are other designs that are going to give you.
Right. Right.
If you use the OG
Yeah.
approach, and you still make the base the third of the height, or
Yep.
the third of the diameter, you're still going to end up with a ball pretty well.
I think that's an excellent point that we should talk about here. I'm sorry, one more. I said we wanted to make this narrow so we could, keep it under control. But if you substitute anything here that fits the criteria of aesthetically pleasing, such as the OG, you'll have the same results. So this is not to be limiting. It is for the demonstration, but not in our design. But we need something that's kind of a pleasing, decent curve in there. And a curve being a continuous, constant, good changing shape. I'm all turned out. No, I think someone like, John ought to step forward and do 500 OGs for us to look at next by August. Any comments?
Yeah, John, the height
Yes.
How do you determine
The,
height?
the height is forced. It, you,
Why can't you just continue the foot down?
because you'll lose this form ends up being below the
No,
base.
Extend the bottom of the foot down towards the bottom of your paper where your thumb is.
Pardon?
Make a higher foot.
Yeah, you can. Sure. I mean, what I'm saying is that if you want the bottom of the curve to get as close as possible to the base
Right.
that it's sitting on, and you make it proportion, it has to be that height. If you make it higher, say you make your foot half-inch higher, then the curve is going to be a half-inch off the
Well, you keep the curve of the bowl the same, you just make the foot taller.
Yes, but
Yes, that doesn't.
yeah, you can do that. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, there's no question about that. What you don't want to do is have it where this curve goes through the bottom.
Right.
But then the height of the foot, if you say it's going to hit very close, then you force that height. But it can be much higher, anything you want, to a pedestal. Yep.
Right, yeah, I didn't know if there's a formula for figuring out the height of the foot.
No, sir, not.
Proportion should be, okay.
I think if you look at this, it's okay. It works. Higher, smaller, may or may not work. I mean, it may work very well. You know, it's all in the taste and what you're trying to achieve. You'll see some in the magazines that are just itty bitty. You know, so, but for this exercise, again, I wanted to stay here because, you know. Okay. Anything else? Okay. Well, thank you.
So you didn't know you were going to have such a math lesson.